Okay, so today I'm going to do something a bit different, which is to take you on a tour of my diffuse library. Um, the word library conjures up sort of notions of grandeur, which unfortunately is not the case because I live in a very small house and my books are strewn all over the place. And the main library is sadly an annex outside in a shed. So I'm going to reveal all the glories to you of how my books are strewn everywhere in today's episode. So I'm going to actually vacate this chair for once. In fact, it'd probably be quite filmic if I sort of spun it round sort of dramatically, but I think the chair would collapse if I did that. So okay, you're going to come with me into the first part of my library. Okay, so this is my bedroom, which is the first part of the library. This is my bedside table, and that is what I'm currently reading, which is a book called Snuff by Victor Pelevin, which I'm about halfway through and is massively entertaining. And over here are the books that I'm sort of reading in phases. So we've got Samuel Beckett's trilogy here, Malloy, Malone Dies and The Unnameable, and I finished Malloy earlier this week and I'm having a bit of a break before I tackle the other two. And this is William H. Gass's The Tunnel. In fact, I bet there's a clever thing on this camera that allows me to focus rather than me pulling it up, but anyway, I'm an author, not an auteur. Yeah, that's a read that you can't really do on the tube in sort of 20-minute bits. You really have to sort of have a block of time to do it. I'm about a quarter of the way through. It's a good book, but it's quite intense. Then down here is the next lot of books waiting to be read. So there's Jonathan Letham's new book, which interestingly has a different title in England than it did when it was released in America. So when I went to inquire whether it had been published in Britain yet, they couldn't find it, and the reason was because it was under a different title, so I don't really understand that. This is Georges Perec's Void, which is an infamous book if you don't know, because it doesn't contain a single letter E within its pages, which is remarkable, not least his translator, who would have had to translate it from French into English without using the letter E, so props to him. It's ironic because George Perec actually has 3 E's in his name, but there you go. That will be my next read after the Pelevin, I think. I'm really looking forward to that. I've got 5 hours of train journey coming up this week, so that will be my companion of choice. Stuart Lee, a stand-up comedian who writes some very, very informative books on comedy and what goes into the preparation. But this is a novel. I think his only novel to date, so I'm quite looking forward to that. Dave Eggers. So I've got a book coming out late summer, and our publishers encourage us to go and make friends with our local Waterstones booksellers, for possibility of doing events and stuff. And being in London, I've got several around me, so I keep going to them, and I feel obliged to buy a book to go and talk to them. And this is one I bought. Eggers is hit or miss. The Circle I thought was brilliant, so we'll see what this is like when I come to read to it. La Medusa. This is in a terrible state, this book, because I read the first 100 pages of 420 or whatever it is, and it's very postmodern and stuff, and I put it aside, and you'll see in the next room of books it was sort of in my windowsill with sunlight, and that sort of discoloured it. It should all be that pink, but where it's grey, unfortunately, is the effect of the sun. I will go back to it one day, I'm sure. This is Roland Barthes, Writing Degree Zero, which asks the question, can any fiction writing be political? And I've read this. It's only in here because I'm going to keep coming back and referring to it. I think it's an interesting book. Compass, yes. The new book by Matthias Ensard. When I talk about the Fitzcarraldo editions, I wax lyrical about Matthias Ensard, and this is his follow-up to Zone, so I'm looking forward to reading that, etc, etc. So these are the books next in line to be read, other than Bart's, which I say in a way shouldn't be there. And that is the bedroom where the magic happens. I don't know if you can see, but there's a massive depression in my bed from not from sleeping, but from when I sort of half sit, half lie there when I write or when I read. So this is where the magic happens. Get your minds out of the gutter, not that sort of magic. Yes, I'm a bit like Dame Barbara Cartland, who wrote all her novels sitting on a divan or an ottoman, but we don't write the same sort of literature. Okay, on to the next room, which you'll find familiar because it's back in where I do the recordings. The study, what's laughably called the study. Okay, so this section here, if you can see this, these are the books that I've recently read. So they move from my bedside drawer that I just showed you into here before they then get actually sort of filed into the library itself proper, and you'll see why it sort of has to happen that way in a minute. So I'm actually going to take these out because today is the day for filing them away. They're all red. Now the one at the back there, the ones at the back there are all on sort of physics and quantum physics and stuff like that. For the simple reason, don't know if we can get them clearly. Anyway, for the simple reason that I have a future project which involves physics, and I'm not a scientist, so I have to educate myself. So in a way, they should be not in this as the red cupboard, but next door in the drawer to be read. But they're not a high priority because I keep getting put off by the prospect of having to read physics and understand it. So they remain there for now. Okay, so I will come back to this pile of books when we leave this room. Okay, so here. Okay, that is the Booker winner, A Brief History of Seven Killings, which I've started. I got about a third through, and I've sort of parked it, really. I may go back to it one day. Now, this section here... No, that doesn't work, does it? So I'm going to pull back, focus, pulley, whatever. This is laughably my reference book section. So we have here a book on the principles of human anatomy, the Official Encyclopedia of Scotland Yard, and Sexuality and Illustrated History. All of which taken together would suggest that I'm a crime writer, which I'm not. But they are useful books to have, although with the internet, I don't crack them open very often these days, although I did open the police one for a blog post I was doing the other day. And these are an assemblage of stray books which are sort of reference. There's one of my favourite books of all time, Cobra Lingus by Jeff Noon, which it's out of print and I could only get second hand. And for years I was watching Amazon and eBay because it was like 60, 70 quid, which I wasn't prepared to pay. And in the end I managed to snaffle it for about £16, which is still expensive, but my God, is it worth it. It's a book of sort of experimental prose that, you know, word shapes, words mutating from other words. It's fantastic. Watchmen, of course, you kind of always have to have a copy of that to hand. This, 26 Letters. Now, this was a collaboration between 26 writers, not necessarily fiction writers, some of them were sort of copywriters and things like that, and 26 artists and graphic designers, and they were paired up with each other, and each was given a letter of the alphabet to sort of illustrate and put a text about to their design to say what that letter was. And it's a very interesting book. It's very diverse, and each letter has a very different sort of sensibility because of the people working on it. That's a periodic table for ease, etc., etc. And I love this book, and I actually joined the group 26 for a while, and it got me interested in all things calligraphy and typography, and to this day I still employ that in my own writing. And we have Jung and Reich, both sort of psychoanalysts who offer quite interesting, creative, artistic sort of perspectives on psychology and psychoanalysis. Male Fantasies is a book about the sort of the Germans who fought the First World War and lost, and then went on to become the core of the sort of the Nazis. But it's about their psychology and the literature, the pulp fiction that they produced, and how that showed their sort of sexuality, how they saw women as horses and sexually, and all this sort of it's a sort of mind-blowingly fascinating book. Susan Sontag on photography, just because it's a useful perspective on the visual image and analysis, etc., etc. Will Self, Junk Mail, that's a series of essays and journalism of his, extending from quite far back, but there's a lot of good stuff in there about literature, and as you would expect with Will Self. And finally, Blitzer Bargeld, who's the singer and lyricist of the German band Einstürzen der Neubauten. This is a book of his lyrics, and I love them. Okay, so now we're going to vacate this. Oh yes, I must remember to pick these ones up. And we're going to go to the library proper. So you're going to get views of my house which aren't terribly interesting. So just bear with me. Boys' bookshelves. Oh yes, I didn't account for sunlight in my filming. There you go. Now this table would seem an ideal place on sunny days like this to read, and indeed my wife does often, but I don't. I prefer to read on my bed. There's an unfascinating fact. And now we approach the library itself proper. No signage, no plaques, just a lot of punctured footballs. And this is it. I'm going to give you the panorama before we actually go in proper. These are IKEA shelves. And as you can see, it is a shed, it is a dumping room as well. So bits of computer kit that are God knows how old. My record collection, well, I haven't had a record player for decades. This is a pile of books on this chair that are so disappointing that I want to give them away to charity shop and just haven't got round. 10 Days by Gillian Slovo is one of them. Which is a book about the London riots of 2011 that I think features one rioter in its entirety. It's just a shocking book. Okay, I'm going to put these books down here for a bit because you're going to see the problem. Okay, so too many books for the shelves I have. It is my dream to have a study where I have wall-to-wall shelving built in and enough of it to store all of these books. But in order for that to happen, you need to buy loads of my book, and you know, it's a fantasy, I'm aware of that. Okay, so there was originally, all the books that are filed properly, there was originally a system. So this is sort of dance, folk culture, all that kind of stuff. And this one is psychology and yeah, Oliver Sacks's stuff. Moving on to the other volume of Male Fantasies, which is not as good, volume 2. Urban sort of theory and spatial theory, all that kind of stuff. This is about the human body, this one, and then we move on to science and death at the end there. You probably can't see any of these books because the point is that putting books like here means you can't see the titles of the books behind, which is really annoying, but there you go. I mean, this is a nightmare, but basically half of this is classic, so I can just see William Faulkner popping through there. I can't even remember what the other, I think again that's sort of things like football hooliganism and culture and sociology stuff in the corner. These are stage plays. This shelf is unadulterated. They are all stage plays because I started off writing plays before I moved into novels. Down here, politics, feminism, there's a sort of bit of sundry stuff on that shelf. Up here originally was my women's shelf, women's fiction that is. Classics, Proust, Kafka, etc., Dostoevsky. There are a few sort of football titles there. Oh God, I can't even begin. I think this was just... Jean Genet and Italo Calvino. Lots of art books there. More modern writers, European writers, and science fiction. So this section there is sort of science fiction writers. Peter Handke, who's a writer I read years and years ago. He's very important. I wonder if I read him now, if I'd still feel the same. Yeah. God. Oh yeah, history. So there's lots of books on Cambodia, the Cambodian sort of Khmer Rouge. Philosophy and books on drug use. David Attenborough's book about nature. Okay, so this here is slightly more orderly. These are all novels, quite modern novels. DeLillo, David Mitchell, David Peace, Ian McEwan, So this was a later edition of Bookshelf that I did manage to put in. But most of the books that are stacked horizontally need to be in a version of this, because they're the stuff I have read more recently. So here, for example, we've got Tom McCarthy and Jonathan Lethem, who are really important writers to me, who should be in there but can't fit. Blake Butler is a really interesting American writer. Houellebecq, as I've extolled about in this series. The quite immensely disappointing Jonathan Safran Foer, Here I Am. Jeff Noon Vert, which I actually won from Jeff Noon. Has he inscribed this? Yeah, here we go. So he ran a Twitter competition to write a sci-fi 140 character tweet, and I wrote one, and he said it was the best and sent me this 25th anniversary version, which I hadn't read, and so I read it, and it's very good too. Joe Nesbo's down here. I do read a bit of sort of crime thriller fiction, not much, and you know. There's not much more to say, except I have to find a place for this bunch of books that I've just read. Fortunately, some of them are quite small. Oh no, that one won't fit. Managed to wedge that one in. Will that go? Just about. Kappa Scripti. It was by a woman who I went to her. She runs a regular reading night in Brixton in South London, and she read from her upcoming novel, which I don't think is out yet, but she read for this, and it was sorry, I mean, I tracked down, you know, her work and this, and I read it recently. It's very good. Virgin Suicides. Now that's only out because my wife started going to a book club, and this was one of their books, and I said, "Oh, don't buy it. I've got it. You can have my copy." So there it goes. Now I did the same with Catcher in the Rye, which I lent to my son to read, and when I got it out of these shelves, it literally shredded itself, because it's over 30 years old, my copy. So in the end I had to go out and buy him another one anyway. So there's probably quite a few of these books that would shred. Oh yes, so on the classic shelves here we've got Proust's Remembrance of Things Past. Ulysses is here somewhere. I haven't read either of them. That Proust was given to me by my parents for my 21st birthday, because I asked them, and I haven't read it still, some 32 years later. But you know, if I retire, that would be on my bucket list, is to read that and read Ulysses. Okay, these are the two big ones because they're hardbacks. I'm sorry, playwriting, I'm going to adulterate you. And that, my friends, one last panorama, is my diffuse library, from the upstairs all the way through to here. Because this is a shed at the bottom of the garden, when it's winter I don't get here. It's too cold, the lawn is waterlogged, so I don't reread books very often. I mean, I don't anyway, but it's made a lot harder by this setup of my books. And to be honest, there's too many damn good books still out there to read. So, I hope you entertained. I hope my tour entertained you, and till next time.